Grace and peace to you from God our Father and Lord Jesus Christ and the power of the Spirit. Tonight our text is Micah chapter 2. This is our fourth week in Micah, and we just got to chapter 2. So we're going to be speeding up a little bit as we march through the rest of the book. And most of the chapters are fairly short, 12 verses or so typically. So we'll have opportunity to be careful and to watch what's going on, pay attention, and hopefully learn something. But tonight is Micah chapter 2. And we're in the last part of this first oracle. Remember I suggested, I didn't invent this, I learned it from others, but I suggested that we think of Micah as 3 sermons. The first sermon is 1 to 2. Begins with listen. Then the second sermon begins with listen, chapters 3 to 5. And then the last 2 chapters, 6 and 7, are the third sermon. But we're in this first sermon. And remember, the first sermon addressed Israel, the northern kingdom, but then addressed Judah through the lamentable reality that the cities of Judah, especially in the lowlands, southwest of Jerusalem, were going to be conquered one by one by one. Remember, even Sennacherib, the Assyrian emperor, said that he took 46 fortified cities in Judah. That's a lot of cities. And basically, he decimates the whole country except for Jerusalem, where he says he caged up Hezekiah like a bird and surrounded them. So everything is kind of gone to pot except for Jerusalem itself. And as we saw last week at the end of chapter 1, that series of cities brings that devastation up to the gate of Jerusalem. And Judah is filled with fear and loss and lament. And that's kind of what chapter 1 is. That last part of chapter 1 particularly is a lament. As we come to chapter 2, we get the reason why. We get an exploration of what was so awful, what was so problematic in Judah that this devastation comes upon the nation. And we also get some pushback against some bad preaching. All right. We'll have a little dialogue here between Micah and the other preachers or the other prophets. They're not called prophets in this case, though that's probably what they were. They use the word more akin to preaching. But there's this competition in Jerusalem, you might say, or in Judah as a whole. Who are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to these prophets who tell you everything's going to be okay? No worry. God's not going to let anything happen bad, Or are you going to listen to Micah? And then we come to the end of the chapter, verses 12 and 13. And here people disagree about what's going on there. Even the rabbis in the early medieval period disagreed about what was going on in 12 and 13. Are verses 12 and 13 hopeful about a future restoration, return from exile? Or are verses 12 and 13 kind of the final word that says God's going to lead you into exile? This is something God's going to do. He's going to gather you up and take you. Yeah. So which way how do you read that? And scholars disagree about that. Rabbis disagree about that. I even disagree with myself about that. I'm not absolutely sure which way that we should take it. Though I guess it might depend on which year you're talking to me. But I can see it both ways. But we'll get there when we get there. I think the more important point is this movement from why is Judah going to be devastated. And what is it about these false prophets or the false preachers? What are they telling the people to give them false hope? And that's what sometimes preachers do. They give false hope. They make you feel okay about where you are. They make you feel comfortable about where you are. Oh, it's okay. There's nothing bad's really going to happen. God's okay with you. Just don't worry. This is Jerusalem. God's not going to do anything bad to Jerusalem. He's not going to let anything happen. So which preacher do you listen to? You want to listen to the preacher who's going to confront you and illuminate your life in the light of God's holiness? Or do you want to listen to a preacher who says, everything's okay? No worries. You're good with God. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's what we get here in Micah chapter 2. So let's begin by reading the text, and then we'll break it up into those three sections. Verses 1 to 5 is the why. Verses 6 to 11 is about which preacher you're going to listen to. And then 12 and 13 are those verses that can be taken different ways. I think legitimately taken different ways. But we'll get there in a moment. So, Micah chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. And the first word in chapter 2. Anybody have alas? Woe? Or it's a word that it's ho. That's the Hebrew word, ho. Ho. It's like a mocking sound. Some people think it originates from some kind of wilderness noise, And we had the jackals and previously. So just think of the Micah, the preacher, saying, "Ho, alas, woe, pay attention. This is bad." And it's always used in reference to something bad. What I'm about to tell you is not what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like. Right? That's kind of this word, alas, or woe. So, chapter 2, verse 1. Alas, for those who devise wickedness and evil deeds on their beds. When the morning dawns, they perform it because it is in their power. They covet fields and seize them, houses, and take them away. They oppress the householder and house, people and their inheritance. Therefore, thus says the Lord, now I am devising against this family an evil from which you cannot remove your necks, and you shall not walk haughtily, for it will be an evil time. On that day they shall take up a taunt song against you, and wail with bitter lamentation, and say, we are utterly ruined. The Lord alters the inheritance of my people, and he removes it from me. Our captors or our apostates, he parcels out our fields. Therefore, you will have no one to cast the line by lot in the assembly of the Lord. Do not preach, thus they preach. One should not preach of such things. Disgrace will not overtake us. Should this be said, O house of Jacob? Is the Lord's patience exhausted? Are these his doings? Do not my words do good to one who walks uprightly? But you rise up against my people as an enemy. You strip the robe from the peaceful. For those who pass by trustingly with no thought of war. The women of my people you drive out from their pleasant houses, and from their young children you take away my glory forever. Arise and go, for this is no place to rest, because of uncleanness that destroys with a grievous destruction. If someone were to go about uttering empty falsehoods, saying, I will preach to you of wine and strong drink. Such a one would be the preacher for this people. I will surely gather all of you, O Jacob. I will gather the remnant of Israel. I will set them together like sheep in a fold, like a flock in its pasture. It will resound with people. The one who breaks out will go up before them. They will break through and pass the gate, going out by it. Their king will pass on before them, the Lord at their head. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I think this is if I think about Micah and all the powerful sermons that are in Micah, chapter 4, which is like Isaiah 2 about going up to Zion and all the nations will flow. I mean, that's a powerful passage. Or Micah chapter 6, the lawsuit. What does God require of you? Right? Walk humbly, love justice, love mercy, do justice. I mean, there's some powerful text. The ending of Micah about forgiveness and how God's going to forgive Israel. But chapter 2 is kind of, I find it one of the more fascinating ones. Because of what it does to say, okay, this is why. And don't listen to those preachers. Right? Which I think speaks a lot to us. Because who he's addressing in chapter 2, verses 1 to 5, he's addressing the wealthy. He's addressing the empowered. They have what do they have the ability to do here? Chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. What is it that they have the capacity? They have the power to do. It's in their power. It's in their hand. What are they able to do? Take away stuff from the people, right? They have the power to despoil them. They have the power to take away their homes, right? Their livelihood. So, look in verse 2, they covet fields and houses. Now remember, Judah is an agricultural society. And people have an inheritance. Their land is their inheritance. And this has been handed down in their families, decades and centuries. And this is how you sustain a family. This is how you live in the land. Is you have this farm that you use for making money or trade, feeding your family. But the wealthy and the powerful, they covet your field. They want to own your field and make it into some kind of sharecropping relationship. Okay, you can live there, but you're going to pay us because we own your field. Isaiah talks about this in Isaiah chapter 5, that the wealthy want to just add another piece of land to their piece of land to their piece of land. And when you do that enough, what happens? You divest everybody of their inheritance. So this is one of the reasons Jubilee, what does Jubilee do with the land every 50 years? Goes back to the original inheritors, right? We don't know if that ever happened. That was the plan, Leviticus 25, but we don't know if that ever happened or not. Yeah. What we get in the prophets is something like here in Micah. The rich are just getting richer, and the powerful are oppressing those who don't have the power. Right? In the whole of chapter 2, as we read through, did you see any other indication of that kind of economic injustice, what kind of evil they're devising in their mind? They're planning evil. They're planning evil on their beds. It's premeditated, exactly. Absolutely premeditated. It's planned. This is what they want to do. I want to grow richer. I want to be more wealthy. I want more land. I want that widow's house, sort of thing. Look down to verse, what is it here? Oh, yeah, verse 9. The women of my people And the young children. Now remember, the young children are the heirs, right? And the women may be widows. Maybe they're still married and their husband has been taken captive, or their husband has been killed in the war, or whatever it may be. But this kind of devastation has an impact on the women and the children. This kind of coveting has an impact on the women and the children. It's one of those old sayings that you can tell the values of a society by how they treat their poor, how they treat their children, how they treat their widows. You know, that's how you know what this society really values. And we can see that here. In verse 9, what does your translation say about their young children? You take away what?
Their children forever.
Take away their children forever? Take away my glory forever as well? Yeah, the children are my glory, right? So we take away the children, that's my glory. God's saying, you're taking away my glory, you know. This is how you treat my glory. That ought to really just kind of hit us in the gut a little bit here, you know. To what extent do we participate, or do we see, do we name this kind of injustice? Because you notice there's nothing about idolatry in this chapter. When Micah is identifying the why, because we have that verse 5, therefore. I just told you all this stuff. Therefore. This tells us the why. Therefore, you will have no one to cast line by lot in the assembly of the Lord. What is that? You have any idea what that's talking about? Cast the line by lot. What are we talking about there? Anybody have an idea about that? It's kind of an obscure kind of reference. Yeah, casting by lot. Yeah. But what are they casting lots about, I guess, is part of the point. Yeah, I think probably the land. Yeah. Because what would happen in an assembly is that as land gets parceled, it would be a communal decision, you know, about the parceling of land. And the assembly would gather, and that the assembly would protect the poor, you know. And that's also where the rich could take over an assembly. They could dictate to the assembly. They could make it their way, right? But therefore, your land's going to be taken away.
It's like it's
yeah,
to them now.
Exactly. It's reversal. Yeah, exactly. The people, I mean, the wealthy here are devising evil, right? They're planning evil. They're going to steal. They go to sleep planning it. They wake up with the willingness and the determination to do it. And they have it in their power. It's in their hand. They have the capacity to do this, and they go do it. They covet. Which, by the way, what's the 10th commandment of the 10 commandments? Thou shalt not covet. Remember what it says? Thou shalt not covet. It's the longest commandment. Thou shalt not covet their wives, their fields, their houses, their animals, you know. And that's exactly what's going on here. Right? That's what Micah sees among the people of Judah. Oh, and we also got a therefore in verse 3, right? So we got two therefores, right? So that's why we're getting this explanation of what is going on here. I don't know if your translation helps you with this or not, but you notice in verse 1 and in verse 3, the word devise or plan. Is that what you see there? Devise or plan? Plan. Yeah, Becky. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, it's a good question. Why are we throwing lots for land when it's supposed to be passed down? Well, because you have multiple sons, right? Or you have multiple families in a big clan. How are you dividing this? Who needs what, right? In terms of time, how large of a family, and so that sort of, some decisions have to be made about land, uh, and it's best made in the assembly. And of course, when you cast lots or you draw lots, the exact reference here is hard to discern, but if it's a casting of lot or whether it's just drawing of lines, it's a communal decision. And it's a communal decision underneath God's direction, right? Whether it's by the lot or by whatever means. But it would be a community that decides, not the rich. Yeah, so that would be the kind of contrast. At least I think that's it. There's some discussion about exactly what it means, So we're kind of, well, I wouldn't say we're speculating, but we're in the orbit. We don't know exactly what that would be, what that would look like. Yeah. No, right. We're not surprised. Yeah. They can go anywhere in the world and see it, right? Yeah. Nothing new. Exactly. This kind of economic injustice, this kind of power in the hands of the wealthy. Yeah. It's not new. That's right. You're right. Yeah.
The next line about that taking place, and then it says in the assembly.
Oh, drawing the lines in the assembly. Yeah, I think it's about a communal decision. So we're going to get together as a people.
Worship.
No, not necessarily. Yeah, it could be, it could be, because assembly can have that meaning, but I think it's more just, this is going to be a community decision. Yeah, that's how I understand it, at least. Yeah. Well, let's look at verses 3 and 4 for just a moment before we move on. But you notice as God now is going to plan an evil, a disaster. In other words, you have worked evil that now will create its own evil, and I'm going to see to it. And you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to get out of this. Your wealth is not going to save you from this disaster that's coming. Your power, what's in your hand, is not going to mean you get away with it. And you're not going to walk around like you are now, haughty, proud of your wealth and proud of your status and your position. Yeah, you're doing that now, but when the disaster comes, you won't be able to do that, because it will be a disastrous time, an evil time. Right?
They have the power to do, they could do otherwise.
Right, it's in their power. They could help the poor instead of coveting what the poor have. Instead of just making yourself richer and richer, you can share and help the poor. Like Deuteronomy 15 says, if you have the wealth, you lend without interest to the poor, so there are no needy among you. It's not a condemnation of wealth. We have to be careful we don't go make a step in that direction, but rather it's what you do with the wealth that is the question. Right? Do you use it to covet other people's stuff? You love the wealth so that you want more because you love wealth? Or do you use the wealth in healthy ways that help? And of course, here it's about coveting. So in verse 4, you get here's what's going to happen on that day. When that evil time comes, they're going to taunt you. They're going to mock you. Just like you treat the poor now, that's how you will be treated. And you will say, we are utterly ruined. The Lord has altered the inheritance of my people. So who's going to get the fields? what they're coveting so much. In verse 4, who gets the fields? That's
This traitor.
the traders. Some translations say captors. And there's a question mark here. Who's he talking about? Is he talking about apostates? Is he talking about the foreign armies? Is he talking about Assyria? They're going to get the land. You're not going to be able to keep the land. The land's going to be taken from you. It's not going to be your land anymore. All right? You're going to be disinherited. And I think that's probably the case here. Captors may be a good, it's not an exact translation, but I think it might have the idea. Those who take you prisoner, those who take you into exile, they're going to get the land. Not you. What you have coveted so much, what you wanted so badly, what you mistreated people for, you will no longer have. Any questions or comments about 1 through 5? Anything anybody want to call attention to? 1 through 5. I know y'all want to talk about preachers. Yeah. They're in verses 6 to 11. Okay, let's talk about preachers. Now, pay attention in your translation, because every translation is going to be interpreting here. And if you have a modern translation, as opposed to the King James or something like that, they're going to use quotation marks. They're going to put certain things in quotation marks. And what's in the quotation mark is typically going to be, this is what the false preachers are saying. This is what they're saying. And Michael's responding to them. So if you look in verse 6, the New RSV has the whole thing in quotation marks, except for thus they preach, kind of Micah's comment. Do not preach, thus they preach. You should not preach of such things. Disgrace will not overtake us. Don't be telling us this bad news. We don't want to hear the bad news. Right? In fact, the word preach is used 3 times in that verse 4. Now you may not have the word preach. You have a different word? Prophesy. Yeah. This is not the word for prophesy. I mean, it's not. It can be in parallel with prophecy in some, but it's literally a word that means to drip. Like drip off the lips. It's coming off the lips. Which is used different ways, and like the Song of Solomon talks about the dripping of honey, and uses it in a romantic way, the drip, right? Here it's being used in terms of kind of speech, they drip. And we get the same word in verse 11 when it says, such a one would be the preacher for this people, would be the dripper for this people, right? So 4 times we have this word drip, translated preach. You can translate it prophesy, but that's based upon kind of the parallelism we find in some other texts. That's why prophesy often is used in that. But we're talking about the preachers who say in response to Micah, this isn't going to happen. This is not going to happen.
Is it because they thought they were the special one?
Well, I think they thought Jerusalem, God's not going to do anything bad to Jerusalem. This is what Jeremiah had to deal with as well, right? Jeremiah had counter prophets who were saying, no, God's going to preserve Jerusalem. God's going to preserve his temple. Remember Jeremiah 7? The people say, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. We got the temple. God's not going to do anything bad with that because we're here in the temple. That's the passage Jesus quoted when he cleansed the temple. You've made it into a den of robbers. He's quoting Jeremiah 7. You think you can be good with God as long as you are doing some stuff in the temple? Well, no, that's not true. So Micah has to deal with false prophets. Jeremiah has to deal with false prophets. Isaiah as well. And their messages God's not going to disgrace this place.
The feeling these prophets must have had, you mentioned Jeremiah. Jeremiah said he couldn't quit crying.
Yeah.
I mean, it really upset him.
Yeah, the weeping prophet, right? Jeremiah, weeping God. I mean, God's not happy about this, right? God's not relishing this. Yeah, gosh.
Is there a benefit to
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think you're onto something there, that these false teachers or false prophets, who are they serving? Who are they protecting? You know, they're protecting the wealthy, right? They may have been even employed by the wealthy, right? They may have been paid by the wealthy. We don't know all those details, but yeah, I mean, who benefits from their message, right? It's the wealthy who benefit from that message. Now, when you look at verse 7, here's where translations are going to be different. Where do you put the quotation marks? I mean, has the message of the false prophets ended in verse 6, or does it go through verse 7? Or where does it stop in verse 7? And so your translation might have those quotation marks in different places. So here's my opinion. My opinion is, should this be said, O house of Jacob, is Micah. So the false prophet says, disgrace will not overtake us. We're good. Disgrace won't overtake us. And then Micah says, whoa, wait a minute. Should this be said, O house of Jacob? And then I think the next line, 2 lines, is the Lord's patience exhausted? Are these his doings? I think that's the false prophets. I'd put quotation marks around, is the Lord's patience exhausted? Are these his doings? Is that right? What translation you use? NIV, that's where they have the quotation marks? Okay. So NIV, I think, is getting it right here. All right. I'm sorry. Sometimes it does. All right. That's why you have to compare translations. You know? Because if you read the King James, they wouldn't have any quotation, right? Just because they didn't do that. It wasn't because they didn't think maybe it wouldn't be appropriate. It's just they just didn't do that. So if it's the false prophet saying, "Is the Lord's patience exhausted?" What's the false prophet saying with that? What are they trying to get across? Yeah. God's going to love us no matter what, right? Yeah. But you got a low view of God, Micah. You think God's just going to stomp on us. You think God's steadfast love has disappeared. You think God's not patient. God's quick to be angered. You know, you think God's going to fly off the handle and do this sort of thing. No, God doesn't do that kind of stuff. Right? Are these his doings? God do this? No. You ever heard anything like that? No, God couldn't do that. No. That's kind of the false prophet here, the false teacher. Then I think Micah comes back and says, with God's mouthpiece, do not my words do good to one who walks uprightly? Hey, if you're walking uprightly, you don't have to worry about my words. You don't have to be concerned. If you are a wealthy person who shares with the poor, you don't have to worry about what I'm saying. My words are good for those who walk uprightly. But you, and I think he's there, he's talking to, Micah's talking, and he's talking to the wealthy, he's talking to these false teachers. But you rise up against my people as an enemy. The way you wealthy people treat the poor, you treat my people like an enemy. And you strip the robe from the peaceful. You might even imagine, here's the wealthy elites up in Jerusalem. And they've gone to war by intention. And who's suffering? The people in the little towns outside down in Judah, right? The innocent and the poor, the people who are just trying to make a living on the farm. They're getting conscripted into the army. Their towns are getting devastated. And the wealthy are trying to own land that doesn't belong to them. That you just get the chaotic sense here. You've become an enemy to the people. That doesn't happen to governments, does it? Governments don't do that. Rulers do not do that. And those who pass by trustingly, in other words, the people who didn't want to go to war, the people who had the robe of something peaceful, right? One way of translating that in verse 8. But you, the people of peace, and the people who didn't want to go to war, you have drafted them into your mess. And you've made an enemy of my people. You're treating my people like an enemy. And so, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, accusatory. And but it just leads us right into verse 9, right? Okay, well, what happens here if you start doing this? Well, the women and the children lose out. Right? You take their husband away to war, or your husband goes into captivity, or your husband gets killed, then what's going to happen to the women and the children? So he says to the people, to the wealthy, and to these false teachers, arise and go, for this is no place to rest, because of uncleanness that destroys with a grievous destruction. In other words, this is an unclean land, and it's going to be destroyed. And it's unclean. Remember, there's nothing about idolatry here. It's about covetousness. That's the sin, covetousness, which Paul does call idolatry in Colossians, right? What is that verse? Is that Colossians 3, verse 5, something like that? I don't remember the exact verse. Paul calls covetousness idolatry. When you desire something so that you make an enemy out of God's people, you desire something so much that it's more important to you than God. It's more important to you than serving the Lord. Yeah. Or is it 4, verse 5? Colossians. It's what? It's 3:5? Okay. Colossians 3:5. So in verse 11, if someone were to go about uttering empty falsehoods, who are we talking about? Who's uttering empty falsehoods? Yeah, these preachers, right? These drippers. They're uttering these empty falsehoods. And what's one of the falsehoods they're saying? I will preach to you of... That's our other, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that's the 5th use of this word, drip. I will preach to you of wine and strong drink. What is that saying? What's that a metaphor about? I'm going to preach to you of wine and strong drink.
What you want to hear.
What you want to hear? Okay. The good life. Yeah. All right. The easy life, the comfortable life, the wealthy life. Because not everybody drink wine and strong drink. Wine was something that was for festivals and for special occasions. But for the wealthy, it was a daily drink. So I'm going to preach to you so that you feel good. I'm going to make you feel good. Kind of preacher a lot of people like. Just one to make you feel good, make you feel comfortable. Right? And such a one would be the preacher for this people. I emphasize that, this people. Yeah, this people like that stuff. Right? Yeah, something like that. These people like that stuff. This is what they want to hear. It's kind of that itching ears, right? And we want our itching ears scratched so that we hear what we want to hear. Right? We want to hear good stuff, you know. We want to know we're okay. And that's your job, to tell me I'm okay. Make me feel good. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a fascinating text, you know, about the dangers. The dangers. The preachers have this. Preachers have this danger that they will play to the wealthy, so they can keep their job, right? So that they can have a living. That's a danger. It's a real risk. And there's also the danger of the listener to say that's the only people we want to listen to. We only want to hear certain good stuff, right? And Micah is giving us an example of something much more difficult, to hear the truth and respond to the truth. And when the truth is you're a coveter and all you do is love money and all you do is accumulate money for yourself and oppress other people to get it, that's not something wealthy people who love wealth want to hear, right? So we come to the last two verses. These are the difficult ones to interpret. Like I mentioned, it's have different opinions. And let me give you both sides of this. Verse 12 sounds like a shepherd gathering a flock for salvation, doesn't it? I will gather all of you, O Jacob. I will gather the remnant. That's, my translation says survivors, but it's actually the word remnant. I will gather the remnant of Israel, which typically in Micah, it's used three other times in Micah. It's always about restoring Israel to prosperity or restoring through forgiveness and reconciliation. So I think that is a clue that we're talking about something positive here. So I will gather all of you. I will gather the remnant. I'll put them in my fold. That is, I'll put them in a pasture. It sounds like Psalm 23, doesn't it? Yeah.
Just kind of compare with what Paul said in Romans 11.
Well, yeah. I mean, Paul, when he talks about remnant in Romans 11, he's thinking about how the prophets use this language, right? So yeah, I think he's connecting with that, especially in other places in Micah. Question would be, is that true of this place as well? You know, which I think probably is, because we do have this pastoral image, right, of God gathering the sheep, God gathering the flock. Yeah.
But he says,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, God's going to do something, right? And is he going to restore, or is he going to lead them into exile? That's the different interpretations. All right, those of you who are left, you're going into exile. Now, or is he saying, I'm not done with Israel yet. There'll become a day when I will gather you up like a shepherd gathers a flock, and I will protect you, and I will pasture you. You know. So which way is it? Huh? It's hard to say both, you know. But yeah, I mean, it could be it has a double meaning. That's so when you come to verse 13, though, you get this breakout kind of language. That sounds more violent. That sounds more, okay, I'm going to bust the door down kind of thing. So you get a different metaphor. The first metaphor is pastor and shepherd and sheep, right? The second metaphor is more of someone who breaks down a door. I'm going to break you out. And the one who breaks out will go up before them. They will break through and pass the gate. The one who breaks out, that's God breaking out. God's going to break it out. God's going to open the way, and others will follow behind. They will break through. That is, they're going to come through after the one breaks through. Pass the gate. They're going outside the city. where are they going? Are they going into exile? Or are they going into redemption of some sort? Right? That's the question. And then the last line says, their king will pass on before them, the Lord at their head. Now, when it says their king, one could hear that as, whoever was the king of Judah at the time, or whoever was the king of Israel at the time. Or you could take it as a Hebrew parallelism. That is, the king will pass on before them. That means he's ahead of them, right? Well, who's at the head? The Lord, right? So that the king is the Lord. That the Lord is the one who's leading them out. He's the shepherd of verse 12. And he's the one who breaks them out in verse 13. And so the identification here is that Yahweh is going to lead Israel, whatever, into redemption or into exile. God's going to lead them. I've changed my mind several times about this over the years. So I'm not really absolutely sure which way to take this. But that's what some people would suggest. Some would suggest that verse 13 is thinking about the Messiah there. Just like we had in Hosea, the son of David will reign, right? And so their king, kind of a messianic notion, their king. And their king is identified with the Lord, with Yahweh. Right? So the king is Yahweh, both in terms of Israel's relationship with God, but also in terms of the Messiah's function. Right? So yeah, I mean, if you take it as redemption, then it has messianic meaning. That God's going to redeem Israel. You're going to shepherd Israel, protect Israel, going to break them out of their exile. They're going to be released from exile, and the Messiah is going to be at the head. That's one way to read this. I think that's probably the best way to read it. But it's not the majority opinion among scholars. The majority opinion is that, no, this is talking about going into exile, not being redeemed from exile. And I can see the point. So I don't really know for sure. It's not settled in my mind. But I think it fits what Micah does in other places. That is, Micah always starts out hard-nosed, right? But then at the end of chapter 5 and in chapter 7, Micah always ends his sermons in hope. And I think that fits it here as well. To take this as a hopeful message fits the pattern of the second and third sermons, that Micah always ends in hope. But I understand that it's not entirely clear. But I hope the message is clear overall, isn't it? Therefore, you live in a society like this, therefore, it's going to self-destruct. It's going to die. It's going to implode. And there are going to be people who are going to tell you, it's not imploding. It's not going to implode. We're good. We are favored by God. This nation will live a long time because God loves us. God started us, right? So we're going to be here for a long time. Well, that's the message of the false prophets of Micah. So we need to be discerning and hear the word of the Lord as best we can see it and understand it. And maybe Micah helps us do that a little bit. Who are we listening to? Who has the power? What are they doing with that power? And that's something we have to think about. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.
Thank you.